I hear all the time on social media that you can refuse anything at the hospital. And I'm here to tell you that there are a few select things that you absolutely cannot refuse in the hospital. Today, we're going to talk about those so that they don't end up catching you off guard. And in my 20 years of labor and delivery experience, when people give you cut and dry things like all the things or everything, you got to know that that's sort of a lie. So today, I want to tell you the few specific things that you cannot refuse in the hospital. The number one, and this is especially for my United States girls, is paying. When you go into the hospital, they're going to want your social security number. They're going to want to know your address so that they can come for you with a bill. Hopefully you have insurance and you can give them that information, but paying at the hospital, especially in the United States, is mandatory. Now, you may have insurance that covers the whole thing, and that is up to them, but they're going to want to know how to come after you for the bill, and it is not something that you can refuse. Now, as a note, if you come into labor and delivery and you are in labor, that doesn't mean that we can come after you for the bill right then or ask you for your credit card before we bring you back to labor and delivery. That should absolutely not be happening. I have a whole video on the choices at admission that you guys should check out. I'll put the link for that one down below. But once you get settled in your bed, they're going to come and talk about payment with you. And yes, I absolutely hate it. I always want to leave the room during those conversations as well. Basic healthcare, including delivering your baby, should be free in the United States. That is a stand I am very firm on. But at this point in time, at least when I'm filming this video, I hope things have changed. It is what it is. One pro tip here is to ask your hospital what the cash pay price is for the delivery. That may end up saving you some money versus what they're going to bill your insurance and how you have to pay, especially if you have a very high deductible. The next thing is that the hospital actually gets to choose the visitors. If for any reason the hospital decides that some of your visitors are unsafe to be around, they can ask them to leave and can have security forcibly tell them to leave. The hospital is required to take care of you, and normally we're going to allow you to have your support people there at delivery. This does not happen very often, but if I have support people who are threatening me or have threatening things in their bag, we can ask them to leave or force them to leave. So that's important to know. They need to be respectful to the hospital staff because they are not required to be there, unlike the patient where we do have to treat you. And along with that, your hospital may have specific items that they do not allow. Now, some of this might be a weapon that includes a gun, or I've had a patient where the partner had a big knife in the bag that a staff member saw. And so we did confiscate his bag and we searched the bag for anything else. The hospital can say you can't have a weapon here in the hospital. So I'm hoping this isn't coming as a big surprise like any of the things in here, but I think it's important to know it's not something to joke about in the hospital room as well. Now, the next thing you can't really refuse is informed consent. It really is the hospital's job to educate you about what's going on, your options, and you can't just be like, no, I don't want to hear about anything. The hospital can get in trouble if we're not telling you about the risks and the benefits about the different things that we do. Now, of course, the hospital should be telling you about the risks and the benefits on both sides, not just the one thing that they want you to do. But a lot of people are like, no, I don't want any education. I already know about it. But if we believe it is a safety issue, it's really important that we educate you and we're able to chart that. Now, if you want a dumbed down, very small informed consent, I think you can let your nurse know that. But it is our job to educate you in the hospital. The next one you can't refuse is HIPAA. So we cannot be telling your spouse things about you in the hospital unless you've given a hospital consent to let them have your information in the hospital. So a lot of times people will just tell their mom to call in and talk with the nurse instead of the patient having to tell their mom what's going on. And we cannot talk to your mom about your care in the hospital unless you give us permission. So sometimes I've had patients who mom's on their cell phone and they'll hand me the phone and say, hey, my mom wants to know more about what's going on. Can you let her know? And that would be a consent for me to talk to the mom at that point in time about what's going on for the patient. That's an important one to know because I think a lot of people think we can just update your family if they call in, and that is not the case. Now, this is a tricky one. I've seen some doulas online saying if you don't like your doctor, you can just refuse them. But the reality is in the hospital, you have to have a doctor who is on your chart. So if you come in, you're assigned a doctor, and especially if they are the main doctor that's on that day, if you refuse having them at your team, I honestly don't know what happens because you have to have a doctor and a nurse assigned to you. Now, nurses are a little bit easier. We can swap them around a little bit easier, but doctors, sometimes we don't have another doctor who's on who can take care of you. So while it's easy to say that you can just refuse to have that doctor in the room with you, if there isn't someone assigned to you in the hospital, it can be really problematic, and the nurses really can't do anything if we don't have our orders. Honestly, I don't see this end up being a problem much at all. It's just something to be aware of. Okay, here's another one you can't refuse, charting, which, by the way, as a nurse, I would love it if the patient was like, oh, I don't want you to chart for this day. I would be like, yay, I don't love to chart either, but the hospital requires us to chart so that both we can bill you, we can know what went on, and we can know what went on, especially if there were problems at your delivery. So charting is not something that you can refuse, even though I really, really wish you could, because I think you would get so much better care if I did not have to spend half of my time typing at the computer. Ugh, nobody hates charting as much as nurses. Fun fact, you can request to see the charting after it's been done. So that's something you can do through medical records. If you have any questions about that, talk with your nurse, or sometimes you need to talk with a charge nurse or the medical records people. So if you're not liking some of these different things, what can you do? Most hospitals have a patient's rights advocate. I don't know if they're on 24/7, and I've honestly never had a patient request one where they stayed long enough for me to get one into the room, but it is somebody that can help you advocate for you if for some reason, like we had to kick out your partner because they were unsafe. That is someone that you could call to see what you could do to maybe get them back in. Another thing you can do is leave against medical advice. Now, at the hospital, we've all been trained to tell you that your insurance might not pay if you leave. Now, I've never heard of somebody's insurance not paying because they left, although who knows with the insurance industry in the United States, but you can always make the choice to just go home. If you aren't liking the way things are going, you can go home, you can go to a different hospital, all of those different things. It is an option for you. Is it always a safe option? No, absolutely not. I would definitely discuss with your team the risks and benefits of leaving before you make that choice, but it is something that you can always do. Sometimes you have to really get at the root of the problem. What is really bothering you about this stay, and see what specific thing you can refuse surrounding that. So let's say we have an induction, you have a Foley bulb in you and you absolutely hate the Foley bulb, but you need to be induced. Maybe you could refuse the Foley bulb, but still take the medications. There are some things that we can do to make things a little bit better rather than you just saying, nope, I just want to go home. Maybe there's something different. Now, fun fact, the nurse actually cannot do anything for you that isn't ordered by the provider. That is the nurse's job, is to carry out doctor or midwife's orders. So if you want pain medication, but your doctor won't order it, the nurse is not allowed to give it to you. Now, that order is only for the nurse or whoever they're ordering to get it done. It is not for you. So let's say your doctor orders that you can't eat, but you decide that you want to eat. That is up to you. However, the nurse cannot give you food. Do you see how that works? I think it's an important part of the hospital that people don't really understand. Doctor's orders are really how the entire hospital runs. Everything that I do to you as a patient is ordered by your provider. Now, a lot of this can be really confusing, and making choices for yourself at the time that it's happening is such an important skill. I recommend taking a birth class that not only teaches natural pain management, which is I know what a lot of people focus on, but also how to make choices for yourself when the time comes, and also like managing early labor and how things are going to work postpartum. You need a class that covers all of that. I actually have a class that I recommend that does just that. I'm going to put the link for it down below. Now, if your hospital is recommending something that you really want to refuse, I want to give you a few things that you can run through in your mind before you make that choice. One of the biggest ones is to say, is this just a policy or is it specific to me? So some providers order no food for any of their patients during labor. They're not taking it on a case-by-case basis, because you're not going to hear this much on social media. I do believe that there are patients who absolutely should not be eating during labor. Not a lot of them, but there are some, versus some patients who are in natural early labor should 100% be able to eat. And so, is this his policy or her policy, or is it specific to me? I think that's a good thing to find out. The other thing is to know the consequences. You can go through the risks, the benefits, and the alternatives. Now, that's informed consent, and we may not offer it on every single thing. Like I've heard some people say, every time we put the blood pressure cuff on, we should be giving informed consent about it. And that is literally just not going to happen, or your nurse nurse would die. But if you have questions, or let's say that blood pressure cuff is driving you absolutely insane, talk with your nurse about it. What can we be doing to make it better? Can I take it off and give you an arm massage, which is usually what I did? Talk with your nurse about the consequences if you refuse all blood pressure taking during your labor and delivery experience versus what else could we do? Learn the possible consequences. And then ultimately, you need to take all of that information and decide what is best for you. As a nurse, there were lots of things that I recommended during labor and delivery, but I am here to tell you, as a mom, that there is not one choice that is right for every single patient in labor and delivery. I strongly believe that everyone should be able to make up their mind about what is right for them, and that is your right in the hospital, except for those first ones that we mentioned, which hopefully you understand. I am big on helping you make confident choices in the hospital. I have a whole video about it that I'm going to link to up above. Thanks for joining us here on The Pregnancy Nurse, where we get you prepared, not scared, for your upcoming hospital birth.